They didn't look at her twice. To them, she was just another black delivery woman in an oversized orange jacket, standing too close to glass walls she didn't belong behind. Her shoes were worn, her hands were shaking, and in that moment, no one in the building believed her life was about to collide with a billion-dollar decision. Inside the boardroom above her head, a powerful white CEO was seconds away from losing everything. His voice cracked. His deal was dying, and the room was filled with people who had every credential, except the one thing that could save him. What they didn't know was that the woman they ignored downstairs understood every furious word being shouted in Mandarin. What they didn't know was that she had spent her whole life swallowing humiliation, learning in silence, surviving where no one ever offered help. Her heart was pounding, fear burned in her chest. One step forward could change everything or destroy her completely. Stay with this story, because the next thing she does will shock everyone in that room. The phone buzzed again on Jonathan Hale's desk. Then again. Then again. By the 10th vibration in less than 20 minutes, even the sound of it felt like a threat. Jonathan stood alone in his corner office on the 40th floor of Hale Tower, staring out over downtown Chicago, as if the city itself might offer him an answer. Below him, traffic crawled through gray streets. Inside his office, the air was too cold, the silence too loud. The voice coming through the speakerphone was fast, sharp, unmistakably angry, and completely unintelligible to him. Mandarin. He caught numbers, large ones. He caught the word terminate. He caught something about legal action. What he didn't catch was a way out. His official translator had quit the night before, burned out and unreachable. The backup agencies hadn't answered. It was Friday afternoon, and by Monday morning, a deal worth over $200 million would either be finalized or gone forever. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, the first hint of gray at his temples showing more clearly than usual. He had built Hale Global Solutions from the ground up. He had survived market crashes, hostile takeovers, and public scrutiny. But this was slipping through his fingers for one humiliating reason. He couldn't understand the person on the other end of the line. Behind him, standing just inside the doorway, Victoria Langford watched quietly. She had perfected the art of waiting for moments like this. Victoria had been Jonathan's executive assistant for years, sharp, polished, always composed. She wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's rent, her posture calm, her expression carefully neutral. But behind her eyes, something else flickered. Anticipation. She had warned him about relying too much on one translator. She had warned him about moving too fast. And if this deal collapsed, the board would need someone steady, someone prepared, someone like her. 27 floors below, in the lobby of the same building, Naomi Brooks pushed her delivery cart past the security desk. She wore a faded orange courier jacket, 2 sizes too big, the zipper broken halfway down. Sweat darkened the fabric at her collar. Her hair was pulled back into a low ponytail that had lost its shape hours ago. Her shoulders ached. Her phone screen was cracked down the middle. She had been on her feet since sunrise. Naomi was 27, but exhaustion made her look older. Not just tired, worn thin, the kind of tired that lived behind the eyes. Her delivery list blinked on her phone. Floor 40, Hale Global Solutions, urgent legal documents. She exhaled slowly. The lobby alone felt like another world. Marble floors, glass walls. Art installations she didn't understand but instinctively knew were expensive. The security guards barely glanced at her ID before waving her through, their eyes already sliding away, uninterested, invisible. That part was familiar. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. Naomi watched her reflection in the mirrored walls. The jacket, the scuffed sneakers, the way people like her were always seen before they were heard, or worse, never heard at all. What no one in that building knew was that Naomi Brooks spoke 6 languages fluently, not because she'd studied abroad, not because she'd gone to an elite school, but because survival had taught her to listen. Her mother, Ruth Brooks, had cleaned houses for diplomats, international executives, and foreign contractors when Naomi was a child. Naomi would sit quietly in kitchens after school, pretending to do homework while absorbing conversations in English, French, German, Mandarin. Later, she taught herself Italian working late nights in a pizza shop. Korean came from endless, subtitled dramas during long, lonely winters. Language had been her escape, her shield. But none of that belonged on a delivery resume. The elevator chimed, floor 40. Naomi stepped out into a carpeted hallway that smelled faintly of coffee and money. At the reception desk, a woman with flawless makeup looked Naomi up and down with a glance so quick it was almost polite. "Delivery," Naomi said, keeping her voice even. The woman took the envelope without touching Naomi's hand. "Wait here." Naomi stood off to the side, gripping the handle of her cart. From behind a closed glass door nearby, voices spilled out, one tense, one panicked, one furious. The furious one was speaking Mandarin. Naomi understood every word. The man on the speakerphone was issuing a final warning, accusing Hale Global of disrespect, of incompetence, of wasting time. He mentioned terminating the contract. He mentioned pulling charitable funding tied to pediatric hospitals overseas. That part made Naomi's chest tighten. She thought of her mother, of dialysis rooms, of waiting lists, of children who needed care but couldn't afford delays. She told herself it wasn't her problem. She told herself to stay in her lane. Then she heard the countdown. 60 seconds. Naomi didn't plan it. She didn't rehearse it. She just moved. She stepped toward the open office door. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to steady it. Jonathan looked up sharply, irritation flashing across his face. Then something else. Desperation, naked and raw. "I can help," Naomi said before she could talk herself out of it. "I speak Mandarin." The room froze. Victoria turned slowly, disbelief etched across her features. Jonathan stared at Naomi like she had just walked in from another planet. Before anyone could stop her, Naomi picked up the phone and began to speak. Her Mandarin was calm, precise, respectful. She apologized for the miscommunication, explained the staffing issue without excuses, addressed the investor using the correct honorifics. She didn't just translate words, she translated intent. The anger on the other end of the line softened. The tone shifted. Jonathan watched, speechless. For 15 minutes, Naomi bridged a gap that money, power, and prestige had failed to cross. When the call ended, the silence in the office felt heavy. Jonathan exhaled like someone who had been underwater too long. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Naomi swallowed. "Naomi Brooks. I was just delivering documents." Victoria's voice cut through the moment, sharp and cold. "What is she still doing here?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. He was still staring at Naomi, and for the first time that day, the deal, in his world, no longer felt completely out of reach. But Naomi could already feel it. The shift in the air. Opportunity had just opened a door, and someone else was already deciding how to slam it shut. Before we continue Naomi's journey, let me ask you something, because what comes next will test fairness, power, and truth in ways that feel uncomfortably real. Do you think someone like Naomi would truly be given a chance in a place like that? Yes or no? Stay with the story, because the hardest part hasn't even begun yet. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She lay awake on the narrow couch in the apartment she shared with her mother, staring at the ceiling while the city hummed outside their thin windows. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the glass walls of the office, the stunned look on Jonathan Hale's face, and the sharp, measuring stare of Victoria Langford. Opportunity had knocked, but it hadn't knocked gently. It had kicked the door open and dared her to walk through. At 6 in the morning, Naomi was already up, showered, and standing in front of the mirror. She wore the only semi-professional outfit she owned, a white blouse from a thrift store, and black slacks that didn't quite fit right. Her sneakers were clean but worn. She had no makeup except a cheap lip balm. She studied her reflection for a long moment. Not the clothes, not the hair, her skin. She hated that her mind went there, but it always did. In rooms like that, rooms with glass walls and quiet power, she had learned that her skin arrived before her words did. "Don't shrink yourself," her mother said softly from the kitchen. Ruth Brooks stood leaning against the counter, wrapped in a cardigan, her face pale but her eyes sharp. "If they invited you back, you walk in like you belong. Because you do." Naomi nodded, even though her stomach twisted. By 8:15 a.m., she was back inside Hale Tower. This time, the security guards greeted her differently. No dismissive glance, no sigh. Someone had told them she was expected. She was handed a temporary badge labeled consultant. The word felt unreal in her hand. Up on the 40th floor, the conference room buzzed with quiet tension. Lawyers, analysts, assistants, mostly white, mostly confident, all dressed like they'd never had to second-guess whether they belonged somewhere. Victoria was already there. She looked immaculate, as always. But when her eyes landed on Naomi, something cold flickered beneath her smile. Jonathan entered moments later, looking tired but focused. "Naomi," he said, nodding at her, "thank you for coming back." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. The video call began promptly at 9. 4 faces filled the screen from Shanghai. Serious, controlled, unimpressed. Naomi took a breath and began. For over 2 hours, she translated with precision that surprised even herself. She navigated legal language, financial projections, and cultural nuance, reshaping arguments before misunderstandings could harden into offense. When tensions rose, she softened them without diluting the message. When confusion threatened, she clarified. She wasn't just translating, she was negotiating. By the end of the call, the investors agreed not only to proceed, but to expand discussions. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, relief written across his face. The lawyers exchanged impressed glances. One of the analysts mouthed, "Wow." Victoria said nothing. Later that afternoon, Jonathan asked Naomi to stay on as a temporary consultant. The pay alone was more than she made in a month of deliveries. Naomi said yes. She told herself not to celebrate too soon. Over the next 3 weeks, Naomi became a quiet disruption on the 40th floor. She worked harder than anyone else, arrived earlier, left later. She reviewed international contracts, flagged cultural risks, and helped untangle deals that had stalled for years. Some people warmed to her, others didn't. The racism wasn't loud, it never was. It lived in the pauses before people answered her questions. In the way compliments sounded surprised. In the way her mistakes, small, human ones, were remembered longer than anyone else's, and always in Victoria's smile. Victoria questioned Naomi in meetings with a sweetness that dripped with doubt. "Are you sure about that translation? Maybe we should have someone more experienced review this. It's impressive, really, considering where you came from." Naomi learned to keep her face neutral, to document everything, to trust no one fully. Then came the board presentation. Jonathan wanted Naomi to present a strategy proposal for expanding partnerships across Asia and Europe. It was a chance to prove she was more than an emergency fix, a chance to step into the light. She prepared for days. The boardroom was circular, perched at the top of the building, with a panoramic view of Chicago. 6 board members sat around a marble table, their expressions unreadable. Naomi began speaking. At first her voice trembled, then it steadied. She walked them through market opportunities, risk assessments, and cultural strategy. She answered questions directly, confidently. Heads nodded, notes were taken. She was doing it. Then Victoria spoke. "Before we continue," she said smoothly, "there's something the board should be aware of." Naomi's stomach dropped. Victoria connected her laptop to the screen. Emails appeared, screenshots of messages sent from Naomi's company account to external addresses. Attached were confidential documents. The room went silent. "These emails," Victoria said calmly, "contain sensitive internal information. They were sent without authorization." Naomi stared at the screen, her heart pounding. "I didn't send those." Victoria sighed, almost sympathetically. "I understand this is difficult, but the evidence is clear." Jonathan stood abruptly. "This doesn't make sense. Naomi wouldn't—" The board chair raised a hand. "Miss Brooks, do you have an explanation?" Naomi opened her mouth, then closed it. Her mind raced. She had never seen those emails before. Some documents she didn't even have access to. "I didn't do this," she said again, her voice tight. "Someone used my account." Victoria tilted her head. "That's a serious accusation." The board members exchanged glances. Doubt crept in, not loud but unmistakable. Naomi felt it settle over her like a weight. She saw it then, painfully clearly. If this were Victoria standing there, denying wrongdoing, there would be hesitation. Benefit of the doubt, an investigation first. But Naomi was different. A black woman, a temporary consultant, no degree, no pedigree. The conclusion formed before the questions did. The board voted to terminate her contract immediately, pending legal review. Jonathan looked devastated. "This is a mistake," he said quietly. But business moved faster than regret. Naomi handed over her badge at the security desk an hour later. The same guards who had smiled at her days earlier now avoided her eyes. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, the building towering behind her, and felt something inside her crack. She had climbed so far and fallen so fast. That night she cried in her mother's arms, not just for the job, but for the truth she couldn't escape. That in rooms like that, people who looked like her were always one accusation away from being erased. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. Anger, cold, focused, steady. Someone had set her up, and Naomi Brooks had not survived everything she'd survived just to walk away quietly. Naomi didn't go home right away. She walked, past the river, past the bus stops, past places where people hurried without noticing her. Chicago felt different now, not smaller, but sharper. Every reflection in every window reminded her how easily she had been erased. By the time she reached her apartment, the anger had settled into something steadier. Resolve. Her mother, Ruth Brooks, was waiting with the lights on. She didn't ask questions at first. She didn't need to. Naomi's face said everything. They sat at the small kitchen table long after the city went quiet. Naomi told her everything. The emails, the board, the way the room had gone cold before she even finished denying it. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Naomi finally stopped talking, her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "People confuse confidence with truth," Ruth said softly, "especially when the confident ones look like they've always belonged." Naomi swallowed. "I don't know how to fight this." Ruth squeezed her hand. "You start by remembering who benefits from your fall." That night, Naomi opened her laptop and began retracing every step she had taken at Hale Global Solutions. She listed what files she'd accessed, what meetings she'd attended, what she hadn't been allowed near. The pattern emerged slowly, then all at once. There were emails time-stamped at hours she'd been at home, documents from departments she'd never touched, access permissions she didn't have. Someone hadn't just framed her. They'd underestimated her. The next morning, Naomi reached out to Ethan Cole, the analyst who had worked closely with her. He hesitated when they met at a small coffee shop downtown, eyes darting nervously. "This could cost me my job," he said. "I know," Naomi replied, "but I'm asking you to look at the facts, not the fear." Ethan had always been quiet, observant. He pulled out his laptop, reviewed what Naomi showed him, and frowned. "This doesn't add up," he admitted. "Your access level wouldn't allow this." That afternoon, he introduced Naomi to Lucas Reed, an IT specialist who had noticed unusual server activity weeks earlier, activity that had been brushed aside by upper management. They worked in silence for hours. When Lucas finally leaned back, his face pale, the truth was undeniable. The emails had been sent from an internal machine registered to Victoria Langford. Not only that, Victoria had been siphoning data for months. Naomi had just been the perfect scapegoat. The problem wasn't proof, it was power. Victoria controlled internal reviews, HR, the narrative. So Naomi went above her. She printed the findings and took a train north to Lake Forest, where Harold Whitman, the board chair, lived behind iron gates and manicured hedges. The housekeeper eyed Naomi with suspicion, but Naomi stood her ground. "Tell Mr. Whitman the company is bleeding," she said calmly, "and the person he trusts most is holding the knife." Whitman agreed to read the report. 2 days later, the board ordered an independent forensic audit. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then the call came. Naomi was asked to return to Hale Tower. This time, the atmosphere was different. Security was heavier. Faces were tense. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. Inside the boardroom, Whitman spoke first. "We were wrong," he said. "The audit confirmed everything. The emails, the data theft, the setup. Victoria Langford had been arrested that morning on charges of corporate espionage and fraud." Jonathan Hale stood when Whitman finished. His voice broke. "I failed you," he said to Naomi. "I should have fought harder." Naomi nodded. You should have believed me. The board didn't argue. They offered her reinstatement, a promotion, public acknowledgement. Naomi surprised them. I'll accept, she said, but not without conditions. She asked for transparency reforms, for oversight, for a program that created pathways for talent without traditional credentials, people who'd never been given a chance. The board agreed. Naomi was appointed Director of International Relations. The headlines called it a redemption story. Naomi called it accountability. Months later, Naomi stood in her new office overlooking the city. The view hadn't changed, but she had. She hired a team that reflected the world they negotiated with. She mentored young people who reminded her of herself. She never softened her voice to make others comfortable. And every morning, before the meetings, before the emails, before the power, she remembered the girl in the orange jacket. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible. That memory kept her human. That memory kept her honest. Because justice isn't loud, it's deliberate. And dignity, once claimed, can't be taken away again. Before you scroll away, let me ask you something. Because this story isn't just Naomi's. How did this story make you feel? Do you think Naomi's fight was worth the risk? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this in real life? If you felt this story, comment 111 below so we know you stayed until the end. Tell us which country you're watching from. And if this story moved you, share it. Because sometimes the stories we pass on are the ones that help someone else stand up and say, that happened to me too.